Welcome to Stories with Gaming, where drama meets gameplay. From outrageous family secrets to quiet revenge, toxic friendships to moments of redemption, we cover it all, straight from Reddit's wildest threads. While the story unfolds, you'll see gameplay in the background, sometimes intense, sometimes chill, but always a perfect match for the chaos or calm of each tale. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for your daily update. My name is Elena. And if I've learned anything in this life, it's that money doesn't change who you are. It changes what parts of you get louder. The quiet ones, the kind, humble, steady parts. Sometimes they disappear under the noise of a bigger paycheck, a nicer car, a louder ego. That's what happened to my family. Not all at once, but slowly, like a tide rising while you sleep. Before it changed us, we were a good family. No, a great one. My parents were kind, grounded. My great-grandfather, Leo, the heart of us, was humble, funny, and sharp as ever into his 80s. I looked up to them all, especially him. We weren't rich, but we had something better. We had ease. And even now, after everything, I still hold on to the sound of my mom humming while folding laundry. The way my dad used to toss me in the air after work with black grease still on his hands, and the gentle scratch of Leo's voice reading stories he carved into wood more than told. Some of my earliest memories were with them, warm, sticky-fingered memories that live deep in my bones. When I was 5, every Sunday was the same. Dad would finish working a shift at the auto shop and come home still in his coveralls, smelling like oil and asphalt. He'd walk through the door and yell, "Where's my shadow?" And I'd come barreling down the hall to leap into his arms. He'd spin me around until I screamed with laughter, then say, "Let's go check under the hood, Peanut." I didn't know what I was looking at, but I'd nod like I did. He'd let me hold a wrench, which made me feel like I could fix the whole world if I wanted to. Mom would be in the kitchen, usually barefoot, radio humming, pie cooling on the counter. She wasn't glamorous, but she was strong in this soft, unshakable way. She'd pull me up on the counter and let me stir whatever she was working on. "Charity drops next week," she'd say. "You think we've got enough extra cans?" I never knew who she helped, only that she helped someone. Always. And Leo? Leo was magic. He lived just 2 blocks over, in a tiny cottage that smelled like cedar and pipe tobacco, even though he hadn't smoked in years. Every Friday after preschool, he'd pick me up in his ancient Ford pickup and say, "Let's take the scenic route," which really meant driving past the duck pond so we could count how many babies waddled behind their mothers. He had the slowest, most intentional way of doing everything. He built me a birdhouse when I was 6, not from a kit, but from scrap wood he sanded smooth by hand. When he gave it to me, he said, "Even the small things need a home." At night, he'd read me stories, not from books, but from memory. Fables, tales from his childhood, wisdom wrapped in humor. I once asked if he ever forgot them. He winked and said, "Stories don't go anywhere. They just wait until you're ready." As I got older, 7, 8, 9, we had these tiny golden routines. Leo would show up with a brown paper bag that always had something in it. Old coins, postcards, homemade jam, or wood shavings if he'd just finished a project. He taught me how to whittle when I was 8. I cut my finger, cried, and told him I was done. He looked me in the eye and said, bleeding a little just means you're learning. Quitting means you're not." I never quit again. Mom got me into helping with her food drives. I didn't mind. I actually liked folding the clothes people donated. She'd tell me, "We fold with dignity. No one deserves wrinkles in their second chance." And Dad, even after long hours at the shop, would still show up at my school plays. He wore his uniform like a badge, sat in the front row, brought flowers once, even though I only had one line. At night, he'd tuck me in, rest his head on my pillow, and say, "You know you're my best thing, right?" I believed him. Middle school came. Leo got a little slower. Dad started talking more about bills. Mom took fewer pies to the neighbors and more calls behind closed doors. But mostly, we were still okay. Leo helped me build a bookshelf in the garage when I was 12. We stained it together, hands covered in ink. "Bookshelves are like people," he said. "Some lean, some carry more weight than others. All of them deserve space." I wrote that down in a notebook and underlined it 3 times. High school is when the cracks began. My dad left the garage to try something new. Said the dealership offered him more money, fewer hours. I remember sitting at the dinner table the night he told us. His hands were clean, no grease. He wore a button-up shirt and talked with a salesman's smile. Mom clapped her hands like they'd just won the lottery. Even Leo looked proud, but cautious. "Don't let the dollars drown the man," he said quietly. Nobody listened. By the time I was 15, the house didn't feel like ours anymore. It was still the same structure, the same squeaky hallway, the same paint-chipped banister I slid down as a kid, but the air had changed. It smelled like new furniture and expensive candles now, like someone had wiped away all the fingerprints that made it home. My dad had officially left the garage that year. The first few weeks at the car dealership, he was buzzing, like he'd swallowed a battery. He'd talk for hours about commissions, leases, quotas, words that didn't mean much to me, but he said them with so much pride that I nodded along like I understood. He bought himself a Rolex knockoff, a new suit, and a Bluetooth headset he wore even when it wasn't connected to anything. "I've got to look the part," he said one night over dinner, carving his steak like it had insulted him. First impressions sell. Mom giggled into her wine glass, and Leo, seated quietly across from me, just stared at his plate like it wasn't food anymore. It didn't happen overnight, but my parents got shinier. That's the best word I have for it. They started caring about how things looked, how we looked, what car we drove, what my friends' parents did for a living. When I got an A on a science project, my dad barely looked up from his phone. When I got a B+ in algebra, he blinked and said, "You can do better. You're not average." Mom, too. She used to bake for bake sales. Now she outsourced it, called some boutique bakery, and slapped her name on the receipt. She joined a new friend group, the kind who met at yoga and whispered about each other behind protein shakes. I once overheard her say, "We've outgrown this neighborhood." She said it like a fact, like growth meant leaving something behind. Leo didn't say much, but I could feel the sadness coming off him in waves. He stopped coming to dinner as often. When he did, it was like he was visiting strangers who looked like people he used to love. He'd pull me aside sometimes, still gentle, still him, and say, "How's your heart, Peanut?" And I'd lie, "Good." He never called me out on it, just nodded, like he was grieving something he couldn't bury. When I turned 16, my dad bought me a car. Used, but sleek, clean, shiny. I should have been thrilled. Every other girl in my class was jealous. But when I saw Leo staring at it from the driveway, hands in his pockets, I couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He walked up to me and ran a hand along the polished door. "She's a beauty," he said softly. But there was something else in his voice. Something like, "Did you want this, or were you told to?" Junior year was when I stopped inviting friends over. The house felt like a showroom. Mom redecorated the living room so many times, I forgot what it used to look like. Dad had a separate office now. Glass desk, leather chair, a giant print that read, "Success is earned." It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a resume. They still said, "I love you." Still kissed my forehead sometimes, but it was like they were saying it out of habit, not feeling. The warmth had been replaced with performance. One day, I came home to find Leo standing in the kitchen alone, staring at the fridge. He turned to me and said, "There used to be drawings here. Remember?" I did. Crayon stick figures. A macaroni frame from 2nd grade. Notes like, "You got this," written in Mom's looping script. Now there was nothing, just a brushed steel door and a magnet that said, "Work hard, win big." Leo looked smaller that day, frailer. "I miss her," he said. "Who?" He gave me a tired smile. "Your mother, before she started counting things." I started driving out to his house more often after that. Not just to visit, to breathe. We'd sit on his porch and talk about real things. My classes, my favorite books, his knees, his dreams, the tree bench he'd built me when I was 5. He asked me once, "You still sit there?" I hadn't in years, but I lied, sometimes. He smiled like it mattered. Then one night, everything changed. I came home from school to find boxes stacked in the hallway. Leo's books, his photographs, his old recliner wrapped in plastic. My dad was on the phone, pacing, barking orders. My mom sat at the table, arms folded, face unreadable. I asked what was happening. Dad didn't even look at me. "We're moving Leo into a care facility." I froze. "What? Why? He's fine here." "He needs more help," Dad said. "More structure. It's temporary." I turned to Mom. "You're okay with this?" She looked away. "It's for his safety." It wasn't. It was for their image. That night, I followed the moving van to a rundown nursing home 20 minutes away. Leo didn't complain. Not once. He just squeezed my hand and said, "Don't worry, Peanut. It's temporary." But I could see it in his eyes. He knew that was a lie. The nursing home smelled like overcooked carrots and bleach. That was my first impression. Second was how quiet it was. Not peaceful, but suffocating. Like all the people inside had run out of things to say years ago. The walls were beige, the kind of beige that makes you feel like you're already fading. Leo's room was small. One window, one nightstand, one bed with sheets so thin they felt like tissue paper. There was a TV bolted to the wall that only played daytime reruns and static. The view outside his window was of a loading dock and a chain-link fence. He didn't complain once. "It's fine," he said when I sat with him that first night. "I've lived through worse." He meant war, drought, poverty, loss. But I could still see it, the sadness beneath the shrug, the grief of being discarded politely. I wanted to scream at my parents, but I didn't. Not yet. I think part of me was still waiting for them to realize what they'd done. They never did. I started visiting Leo 3 times a week, even when I was drowning in clinicals and night shifts. Even when I had exams and cold pizza and exactly $17 in my checking account. I'd bring crossword puzzles, books in large print, his favorite lemon cookies from that corner store he loved. Sometimes we didn't even talk. I'd just sit by his bed while he dozed, and it felt better than being home. One night, I asked, "Do you want me to bring anything else next time?" He smiled, soft and tired. "Bring me stories, Peanut." That's all I ever needed. At home, my parents stopped asking where I was going. They were too busy entertaining people who wore diamonds during the day and used phrases like generational wealth and mutual fund portfolios like they were ordering drinks. Our fridge was always full, but the house felt empty. Mom started talking about remodeling again. Wanted to gut the kitchen, marble countertops, new appliances, real cabinets this time, not that builder-grade crap. Dad just nodded, not listening. He was always staring at his phone now, always in a deal. They didn't fight. They just coexisted, like furniture that never touched. When I was 22, I graduated nursing school with honors. Neither of them came to the ceremony. Dad had a sales conference. Mom had a migraine that mysteriously resolved before dinner at some rooftop steakhouse. I didn't even cry. That was the scariest part. I didn't expect them to show up anymore. But Leo did. He wheeled himself into the auditorium, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big, and held a bouquet of daisies in his lap. They were a little wilted, but when he handed them to me, I swear they felt like gold. "I knew you'd do it," he said, gripping my hand. "You're not like the rest." I got my first job at a community hospital on the west side, night shifts mostly. Long hours, heavy lifts, short-staffed, underfunded. But real. Tangible. I came home tired but fulfilled. I felt useful. I visited Leo every Sunday now, and every Sunday I'd tell him, "One day I'm getting you out of here. You'll live with me." He never pushed, never asked when. Just nodded and said, "I believe you, Peanut." It took years. More than I thought. I worked my way up. Charge nurse, then assistant supervisor, then finally supervisor of care services. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough. I got a little house in the quiet part of town. 2 bedrooms, small garden, windows that actually opened. And when I walked through that nursing home with the discharge papers in hand, Leo looked up at me like I was holding a sunrise. "You were serious," he said. I always was. He lived with me for the last 5 years of his life. He took over the spare room, decorated it with old family photos, and hand-sketched blueprints of furniture he never got to build. He taught me how to make real oatmeal, not that microwave nonsense, and how to mend things instead of throwing them out. Some mornings we drank coffee in silence. Others we talked for hours. He never asked about my parents, and I never brought them up. I think he knew the distance between us was something I chose, not out of spite, but self-preservation. When he died, it was quiet. Peaceful. He was holding a book, mid-sentence, eyes half closed like he was just thinking something over. There was no will, no hidden savings, no grand gesture of inheritance, just a folded note in his drawer. It said, "What you carry matters more than what you keep. You carried me well, Peanut. I'm proud." I held that paper for hours, rereading it until the ink blurred. I still have it, pressed in the back of my journal. Grief is strange. Some people cry all at once. Loud. Ugly. Let it break them like a wave. I didn't. I kept going. After Leo passed, I cleaned his room with slow hands, washed the bed sheets, folded his clothes one last time. I couldn't bring myself to donate them yet, so I sealed them in a plastic tub and wrote Grandpa's room, keep, in Sharpie like that label might freeze time. The house was quiet without him, not just in sound, but in presence. He had a way of filling a space without needing to speak. I didn't hear from my parents after the funeral. Not really. Mom left a voice message, said something vague like, he had a good run, didn't he? Dad didn't say anything at all. And honestly, that told me everything. Years passed. I moved up again at the hospital. Head of nursing administration. I had a team, a badge, an office that smelled like lemon disinfectant and printer ink. I became the person people came to when they didn't know what else to do. I liked that. I liked being needed, not because of blood, but because I earned it. I still went home to an empty kitchen, a quiet garden, and Leo's picture on the shelf. Some days I missed the mess. Most days I didn't. Then one afternoon, I got a call. It was my dad. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut, maybe curiosity, maybe the ghost of obligation, made me pick up. His voice was rough, cracked in places it never used to be. He said, I need to talk to you. I waited. He cleared his throat. Your mother left, took the credit cards, the guest room TV, and the dog. Apparently I'm hard to live with. A long pause. Then, I'm sick. Lung disease. Early stage, but already enough to slow him down. He couldn't work. Could barely walk across the room without coughing. He wasn't asking for money, not yet. He was asking for help. I can't do this alone, Elena, he said, voice cracking. And I should have said no. Should have told him he made his bed. That he could lie in the cold marble house he built out of ego and empty priorities. But instead I said, okay. I picked him up a week later. He was smaller than I remembered. All that shine, the suits, the smugness, gone. Just a man in a loose windbreaker with a plastic pill sorter in his lap. On the drive, he asked, You taking me to your place? I turned down a familiar road. Didn't answer. When we pulled into the parking lot of the same nursing home he'd once put Leo in, he went quiet. You said it was temporary, I reminded him, putting the car in park. Back then, when it was your father. He looked at the building like it had just swallowed him. Now it's your turn, I said. Not bitter, just honest. I still visited, brought him groceries, helped coordinate his meds, but I didn't bring him home, because home is sacred, and you don't get to come back once you've decided that people, good people, are disposable. Mom reached out not long after. At first, it was performative. A few texts, a forwarded meme, a blurry selfie with some friend I didn't know. I ignored most of it, until one message came in, short and strange. Do you know someone I can talk to? I think I messed everything up. I stared at it for a long time. Eventually, I connected her with a family friend, a retired counselor who ran a sliding scale therapy group. A week later, she emailed me. I went. It hurt, but I think I needed it. She started showing up differently after that. Less makeup, more apology. Not the performative kind, the honest, aching kind. She told me in one of the most awkward coffee shop meetups of my life, I let money turn me into someone I didn't recognize. I thought it meant security. I didn't see how it made me cruel. I was weak. I stood by when I should have fought. And I know I was a horrible example for you. I'm sorry. You became everything I wanted to be, and I resented you for it. I didn't say much that day, just nodded. Forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It doesn't arrive like a letter in the mail. It builds in layers, in looks, in small efforts that say, I want to try again, if you'll let me. So I left the door cracked, not wide open, but not locked anymore either. People assume that forgiveness is a door you walk through, that it's clean, final, tidy. But for me, it was more like a hallway, narrow, windowless, and full of echoes. I could hear the past behind me, close enough to graze my back, even while I kept walking forward. My father stayed in the nursing home. He didn't ask to come live with me again, not after that first day. Whether it was pride, shame, or a quiet understanding of what he'd done, I'll never know. But he called sometimes. Short conversations. Soft, almost pitiful. How's work? You still got that little garden? You remember that old yellow bike of yours? I found a picture of it. He never asked how I felt. Never apologized. But maybe that was too heavy a thing for him to lift. Maybe this was his version of trying. I visited once a month, brought him clean socks, taped up old photos above his bed, not because he earned it, but because I didn't want to become him. Mom changed more visibly. Therapy turned her inward and eventually outward. She sold the big house, moved into a modest apartment not far from where we grew up. She started volunteering again, not for show, but because I think she was trying to remember what goodness felt like. She sent me small things. A knitted scarf, a photo from when I was 5, a pie she made herself with a note that read, "It's not store-bought. I promise." She started writing, not a book, just little reflections, prayers, reminders. In one of them, she handed me in person, nervously, shaking slightly. It said, "I spent too long making things look beautiful on the outside while everything inside me rotted. You did the opposite. You made a life full of grace, even when no one gave it to you first." I cried when I read it. Not just for her, for all the versions of her I needed growing up that never came. For the guilt she must carry now, waking up and realizing you taught your daughter the exact opposite of what you meant to. I let her hold my hand after that. That was how the forgiveness began. Not with words, but with hands. I still carry Leo with me. When I fix something in the house instead of replacing it. When I leave a handwritten note in a patient's file that says, "You matter." When I fold towels with corners aligned, because he once told me that how you do small things is how you do everything. His old tools are in the garage. The birdhouse he made me when I was 6 is faded, but still hanging in the tree behind the kitchen. Every now and then, I sit on the bench he built. It's warped a little, weathered, but it holds, just like I did. I don't hate my father. I don't admire him either. He's not the hero of this story. He's the warning. But sometimes on quiet days, I remember the man in the garage with oil on his hands, singing badly to the radio and calling me his best thing. And I think maybe there were 2 versions of him too, the one he meant to be and the one he became. And that makes me not sad, not angry, just human. There are no photos of my great-grandfather in a suit, none of him holding stacks of cash, none standing next to a luxury car. But I remember him more clearly than anyone. I remember the feel of his hands, steady, scarred, and full of quiet purpose. I remember the stories, the bench, the birdhouse, the time he sat beside me in the dark and said, "Most things aren't monsters. They're just the world shifting its weight." He never talked about legacy, but he left one anyway. And I think that's what I want too. I'm 40 now. The lines on my face are soft but deeper than they used to be. I've got a little gray coming in near my temples. I don't dye it. I kind of like it. The hospital promoted me again last spring. I head a department now. The youngest ever in that role, apparently. A coworker called me intimidating but nurturing. I laughed. Leo would have loved that. I still live in the same house, added a porch swing. Planted more sunflowers this year. They're messy and stubborn, like me. Sometimes when the wind's just right, I can smell cedar and old pipe smoke. I like to think it's him. My mother and I are fine. We meet once a month for lunch. It's never easy, but it's no longer tense. She's gentler now, slower to speak, faster to listen. Last week, she said, "I would have collapsed without therapy. I'm still embarrassed it took me so long to get help." I told her I was proud of her. I meant it. My father died last winter. Pneumonia. It was quick, quiet. I handled the arrangements, no big funeral, no grand speeches. He left a small savings account, a dusty photo album, and a note. "I wasn't good to you. I see that now. But I saw you, truly, at the end. You turned out better than I deserved. I'm sorry I waited too long to say that." I didn't cry, but I did drive to the nursing home one last time, stood outside the loading dock where Leo's window once looked out, and whispered, he finally understood. Then I left. I don't have kids of my own. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I've mentored 4 new nurses in the last year alone. And sometimes I sit on the bench Leo built and talk with a neighbor's kid who likes to ask impossible questions like, "Do trees think?" Or, "Why don't clouds fall?" And when I answer, I hear his voice in mine. Stories don't go anywhere. They just wait until you're ready. If someone asked me what I'm leaving behind, I'd say this. A life that didn't repeat the damage it came from. A home built on repair, not resentment. A name that might not be on any plaque, but is etched into the small, soft places where care lives. We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose what we pass on. And I choose this: kindness, boundaries, stillness, and a bench under an old tree that reminds anyone who sits on it, you can carry the weight differently. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe for more content. If you want to share your stories, please comment below. Additionally, what is your opinion on the poster's decision?